Good evening, and welcome to a special episode of 2020. Tonight, we are talking about Alfonso Lopez. Mr. Lopez was found not guilty after appealing the federal case against him due to him bringing a gun to school.
Allegedly, Lopez had brought a gun and bullets to school to sell to a fellow student. Acting upon an anonymous tip, school authorities confronted Lopez, who admitted he was carrying the weapon.
Lopez was brought into custody but argued that the Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1990 is a violation of the 10th Amendment, which is when Texas dropped the charges and it became a federal case.
Here's the interview we had with him.
Good morning. Today we have an exclusive interview with Alfonso Lopez, the man at the center of the Supreme Court case against him for bringing a gun to school. Mr. Lopez, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. In 1992, you were a senior at Edison High School in San Antonio. You were arrested for bringing a firearm onto school grounds. Can you explain that day from your perspective?
Yeah, so I was 18 and I'd brought a .38 caliber handgun into school. I planned to give it to someone and not actually use it, but before I was able to, I got caught. At first, I assumed I would be charged by the state, but to my surprise, I was charged under federal law.
Oh yeah, that's right. The federal government had charged you under the law that had made it a crime to have a gun within 1,000 feet of a school. But you don't end there. You end up all the way to the Supreme Court. Can you tell me how that happened?
Well, my lawyer argued that the federal government had no right to charge me under the Commerce Clause. Schools are a state matter, and this law didn't have much to do with interstate commerce. The lower courts did not agree with this, but once we made it to the Supreme Court, they ended up ruling in my favor.
Yes, in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court had ruled that the Congress had overstepped the authority surrounding the Commerce Clause. How did you feel when you got this ruling?
To be honest, I felt very relieved. I wasn't trying to protest or make history. I was just a kid who made a dumb decision. I do believe, though, that my case set a precedent that not everything falls under federal power and that there are truly limits to what Congress can regulate under the Commerce Clause.
Some people believe that this ruling has weakened the gun control laws, while some people believed that it is necessary to prevent the federal government from getting too much power. Do you have any opinions on this?
Well, I'm not saying that bringing a gun to school isn't a big deal. But the question isn't whether it was wrong, it was who had the right to enforce this law. Schools and crimes are normally handled by the state and even local governments. But if the federal government tries to stretch the Commerce Clause, where does it end?
That is a very good point. Do you think this case will have an impact later on down the road?
100%. This case was the first time the Supreme Court said, "Hey, Congress, you can't claim everything affects commerce." It reminds them that there is a limit on federal power and reinforces that states do have rights too.
Do you regret your actions?
Of course. Bringing a gun to school was a terrible decision and a bad idea, and I take full responsibility for my actions. But I believe that my case has helped clear up some constitutional issues that need to be addressed.
Thank you for talking tonight, Mr. Lopez. Sharing your perspective and insights on this story definitely opens a bigger conversation.
Of course, thank you for letting me share.
So interesting to hear his point of view on the matter.
Agreed. After this commercial break, we will be back with more interviews, including a 2020 exclusive with his lawyer, John R. Carter.
ZOOMTAN. I was tan last summer, now I'm pale again. I need a little bit of help to be ready for the beach. Zoom Tan puts the sun within my reach. Brown as a biscuit for $9.99. ZoomTan.com for a limited time. Zoom Tan, $9.99. ZoomTan.com. Zoom Tan for a limited time. Zoom Tan.
Welcome back. We are now going to head over to the interview we had with Mr. Lopez's lead lawyer, John R. Carter.
Good evening. We are back tonight with Mr. John R. Carter, the lead attorney that represented Alfonso Lopez in the Supreme Court case, United States v. Lopez. Mr. Carter, hello, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So this case revolved around Mr. Lopez, who was a senior in high school but was convicted under the Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1990 for bringing a gun to school to sell to someone else. What do you think caused you to challenge the government's authority in this case?
Honestly, our argument was straightforward. We believe that Congress had overstepped their constitutional boundaries by passing the Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1990 under the Commerce Clause. The law made it a federal crime to bring a firearm onto school zones, but we argued that bringing a gun to school has nothing to do with the interstate commerce, which is the limit of Congress regulating power.
The federal government argued that bringing guns to school would cause violence and would have a negative impact on education and eventually lead to problems in the national economy. What was your argument against this?
We pointed out that the argument was too broad and that if Congress could argue and regulate something like gun possession that doesn't have a direct impact on the economy, then where would it end? There would virtually be no limit to their power. Education and crime and local matters have always been a state issue. Allowing Congress to regulate under the Commerce Clause gives the federal government unchecked power.
So ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled in your favor 5-4, striking down the law. What was your reaction to this?
Obviously, we were thrilled. This case proved that there are distinct limits of what Congress can regulate under the Constitution. This ruling was a victory not only for states' rights, but for individuals too. It sent the message that not everything can be justified under the Commerce Clause.
What do you think this case means for the future of America?
It will repeat that we have a system of government where powers are divided between federal and state. It is critical to maintain the balance of power. This case helped restore the balance and will hopefully continue to influence constitutional laws for many years.
Great to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time to meet.
Of course, it was a pleasure. You're reading, motherfucker!
Do you want to look like this? Pale, upset, angry, walking away, when you can look like pow! Yeah! Beautiful, gorgeous, tan, luxurious. Give us a spin. Give us a spin. Zoom tan 999.